Hello everyone. Today we're going to work with Indian ink. The particularity of Indian ink is that it's waterproof when it dries. So that means once it's put on the paper and if you want to work and add washes to it, everything you put in the first place is safe. Yeah. You can use also acrylic ink, black acrylic ink if you don't have Indian ink, but do not use Chinese ink. Chinese ink behaves in a very similar way to watercolors or gouache. That means once you put it there, it might be dry, but if you do a wash on top of that Chinese ink, the wash will run the color, the black ink from underneath. Yeah. So only waterproof ink. Yeah. So this is the image we're going to work from. I have a few brushes. I'm going to use a fan brush, scissors, always very important, elements to do masking. So we're going to use candle, of course, masking tape maybe, yeah. And I'm not going to use it, but one thing you could use is masking fluid. I'm not going to use it because I will have to wait for it to dry, and it's very humid in here today, so I might not have the time for waiting for it to dry. Then anything you can use to make marks, so for example skewers, they are very handy, are always good. I'm going to do spattering. You can do spattering with a brush, or you can also do spattering with a toothbrush. Yeah, so if you have a very nasty toothbrush nearby, or one that you have to retire, keep it nearby. That's in there. Another thing you can use, which is quite handy as well, is a bamboo cane. Yeah, you can just cut a bit of bamboo and just shape the tip to whatever line you would like to use. So this one you can see is a flat line. Okay, so I think that's it. If I have more ideas, I will let you know as we go along. Scissors are important because we are going to use, of course, stencils. Yeah. One of the times I did this activity with this image, I just knocked my bottle of ink and it went into my keyboard. So make sure you don't have anything valuable nearby. Okay, so we are going to start. I'm going to put the image in here so you can see it. The ink in here, so everything handy. This is to create different shades of blacks, so or grays in this case. The blacks are going to be the ink straight from the bottle, but then you can make more wishy-washy or watery ink amounts to play with the kind of grays you want to put on the picture. Yeah, so you don't have to use just one black. What I normally do is I keep when I clean my brushes, I keep this water, yeah. So this is a bit more transparent than the Indian ink, yeah. That stains a lot more. So I don't throw the water away after I finish my picture. I just keep the pot to play with this and create lighter washes of ink. So that's something you can do as well. So this is an exercise to just play and learn with ink. I'm assuming that most people haven't tried to use ink before, so just give yourself some time to enjoy and make a bit of a mess. Another thing you might need to do before we start, I am not worried about my hands getting dirty, but if you are, just use gloves. The ink gets into the gaps in here between the nails and the flesh, and it's very difficult to get rid of it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to draw the picture using something that is continuous line. That's for you to just relax. So I'm going to use a brush rather than a pen, but you can use a nib if you have one or you prefer, yeah? The first thing we're going to do before we start is playing with ink. So ink shares a lot of qualities with watercolor or water-soluble techniques, in fact. If I use ink, I just put just water in there and I just drop ink in here, you can see the ink will go only where there is water. This is a very nice effect. If you have a big pool of water, on the paper and you drop ink on it, you see how quickly that ink moves? But if the film of water I have on the paper is thinner, the movement of the ink is totally different. You can also use this effect when it comes to spattering. Yeah, it will be worth playing with different drying times. So put the wash of water there, wait a bit longer each time to see how much you can control the movement of the ink in there. If we do the spattering here, which is there's no water in here, yeah, it's totally different. Both very nice effects. Of course, now we go back to stencils. So just cut the stencil to the shape you want. You can use the positive or the negative, it's up to you. I'm going to put it in here. You can use the brush like we did in here, or you can use the toothbrush. You need to make sure that the toothbrush is completely dry, because if you have a lot of water on the toothbrush, when you dip the tip or the edge of the toothbrush into the ink, you will have drops, big drops coming. What I will also do, instead of doing this, which is what is likely to happen, yeah, just put a little bit of ink on a flat surface or a socket, like for example a watercolor pan or the pan I was using before or showing you before, which I don't know where I put it now. Here. Yeah. So you just do like this. A little bit of ink will do. Then we will get rid of excess of ink here, because otherwise you will still get the big drops and we don't want that. If in here, because we're experimenting, it doesn't matter if we go straight forward on the paper, but if you are doing a very nice picture and you want to do this spatter with the toothbrush, make sure you try how much ink you have on a different piece of paper. And you remove the stencil and it's quite a nice effect. The speed that affects to this kind of spattering or the brush, the speed will make a very dramatic change. So with a lot of pressure, you see the movement of the spatter going on the different directions. With very little pressure and with lots of love, you get a more regular pattern in here. Now cleaning my fingers on this, you can also use this to print. It's quite a nice effect, yeah? You can do all sorts of things. If we use candle quite heavily sometimes, when I use ink, and you can see it takes a bit of time for the ink to be repelled by the candle, yeah? What I have noticed as well, if I use ink straight from the bottle, sometimes the ink stays on top of the candle. Yeah, so it will be just a matter of letting it dry and then just scrub it off with a blade. You can also use, as we use the stencil, you can also use masking tape or masking fluid or candle to do the different effects. You don't have to use candle on white paper, you can use candle on an area where you have already put some ink in there. For example, I really like this effect, so I'm using candle all over. I discovered recently that birthday candles are the best option because they are already quite fine. If you use a chunky candle, you will get chunky lines. When I use the candle, I also keep rotating the candle so the line keeps thin. If you use the candle all the time in the same position, what is going to happen, you can see in here, yeah, how it's been eaten by the texture of the paper, the candle. So this surface becomes bigger and bigger each time, and you will get a thicker line. So keep rotating the candle. And I'm going to use ink, wishy-washy ink. I'm just going to get rid of the ink on top quickly. And you can see the ink is not where the marks are. They're safe, yeah? Don't use candle on wet paper, because if you use candle on wet paper, you will just make a mark, yeah? And damage the paper. It's better to wait for the candle to dry, for the paper to dry, sorry. And now you can see, once the ink is still in this area, that's what was the spattering on wet paper. What a very nice effect you get. Very, very beautiful. What else are we going to do? I think that's it. You can use also mark brushes and elements to make marks. So if I find my skewer, or this one, yeah, just dip that into the ink, and you can just use that to make lines, which are beautiful lines anyway. And you can also maybe use a sponge. Let me find my sponge. The same way we did this with a piece of tissue paper. You can find a sponge. You can use this side of the sponge, or you can also use this side of the sponge. When you use a sponge, don't put the sponge into the ink. Just use a brush to put a bit of ink on the surface of the brush. And then we're going to move up here. Yeah. If I do it very softly, you get a very similar texture to the spatter. If you press a lot, more ink will be put on the paper, yeah? And you can also drag it. All very beautiful effects. And I'm sure if you play long enough with the technique, you will find other things you can do with it. So you just keep it playful and try different things each time. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this paper. Going back to the picture, I'm going to create a frame. Every time I create a frame, I allow a bit of space between the edge of my picture, what my picture is going to be, and the edge of the paper, just in case I need to span a bit. It's more square shape, something like that. Okay, so to try different things and to loosen up a little bit, what I'm going to do, I am going to use continuous line. Continuous line is about using and following the lines on the picture you're working from without lifting the tip of your brush. Yes, that's right. You're going to work with a brush. When you work with a brush, sometimes I do to control the line, I use my hand to stop me from doing this, because if I do this, the line is likely to change. But if I do this, and I move my arm instead of my wrist, the line is likely to stay more or less the same. So don't move your wrist, just move your whole arm, yeah? And it doesn't matter if it doesn't look like this. This is the first time you're going to try this. It's more about learning about inks than doing a pretty picture. So I'm going to start maybe here. Something I find useful is to keep my finger moving around the photograph when I'm doing my continuous line drawing, so I don't get lost. If you get lost, of course you can lift the tip of the brush and go back to where you think you were last time, yeah? So it's not like Es un big no. So I'm going to start here, do it very slowly, with lots of love. Don't rush it, going back in here, going in. You can see some of the laces in here. Somewhere in here, and I'm now here. Another lace in there. Another lace in here. I can see the siding here. That's the tip of the boot. That's the top. Now, because I'm going this way, and this is moist, be careful because you can drag the ink along, yeah? It can create very interesting effects, but if you don't want them, try just to work on this side before you move to the other side, so you allow this area to dry first. Oh, that's something, I think that's the lace. I'm now playing a bit with the pressure, so my line gets thinner and thicker. That is called organic line. Something like this. Now being careful not to touch the moist area. I'm going to go back here. Now joining to the next boot here. More ink. Got a line here, somewhere in here too. A lace. Coming back here. You have all the different laces in here. I'm not trying to make the laces the same. I'm just getting a feeling of them. It's nice to work with the brush almost running out of ink. Okay, so that will be the drawing. Those lines that I used to experiment first with the kind of brush strokes we're going to use, or line with brush. Now they have become part of my picture. I'm going to redraw my frame. Yeah, there we are. So the first thing we are going to do is just play with the washes we were mentioning before. So you need to prepare just something with water. So any pocket you can find. This is just a dirty brush I had before with ink. You can use any size brush, but if you use a brush that is slightly smaller than this one, for example this one, yeah, you're going to use it on the side, like this, yeah? Now we're going to just block. I'm going to make a little bit dirtier than that, I think that's too pale. So you just check how dark you go. You can check on the drawing because again we are experimenting, or you can check on a different part of your paper. If you are a bit precious about it, don't be, if you can avoid it. And I'm going to just use the side and block everything out. Without being careful, I don't mind if the blocking goes out the lines. You see that wasn't dry, so you can see the line, the ink running. Be careful with that, that can be dangerous. A bit more water. Maybe add a bit of a shadow there at the bottom. I'm not going to add anything to the background just yet. Now, because I don't want to wait too much or use the hairdryer, you can use the hairdryer though. You can also do this. You can just use a kitchen towel and remove a bit of the layer of ink. Of course, that leaves a little bit the values. I'm not going to remove everything. I like to leave a bit of something areas darker in there. I don't know if you can see, but the kitchen towel has left some marks, some texture, yeah, which is quite nice. I think that's a bit too pale for me, so I'm going to do another layer. I could use this very pale one to keep the lighter colors happening in the boot in there. So I'm going to do a second layer on the boot. Now we are going to allow this to dry a bit more. If there are some areas where you can see a bit more moist, you can remove them and create some irregular darkness on that area of the boot. Yeah, this is also quite nice. They are very old boots, so the dirtier they look, the better. I just noticed that these two values are too close, and in here these two values is how we see the colors in black and white. These are a bit more different between themselves, so I'm going to just add another wash in here to separate them. You can see that once the ink is dry, it's not going anywhere. So now at this stage, these are more or less dry. I'm going to do some spattering. So remember, I just put a bit of ink on the lid. Yeah, I'm going to put the lid in here. And I'm going to do some spattering with the toothbrush. And for that, I am going to create random shapes with my paper. Or if you have already pieces of paper there, you can cut it or you can tear the paper apart. What I normally do is just random shapes and then adjust the shapes more or less to what I've got on the paper. That could go there, that could go there. Maybe something smaller here for later on. Well, I could do that later on. That can go like this here. So I'm going to use the toothbrush, get rid of the excess of ink. Okay, and I'm going to spatter. If some of the spatters you think they are too strong, you can always go with the tissue and they look lighter, they become lighter. You can tell in there, it's moist. Now I'm going to just use a bit of tissue paper to get rid of the strong marks. One thing I didn't demonstrate at the beginning of the video is using the fan brush. Same thing we did with the toothbrush. I come to the lid, just get rid of the excess of ink in here on the paper. Check. And then I'm going to come here and make more of a mess on my boots. Now while my boots are drying up a little bit more, I'm going to start making a mess on my background. So why not use a little bit of candle? I can just add a bit of candle in here. Maybe a bit more candle in here. You can also use the candle on the side, like that. I'm going to use a big brush and a lot of water and very little amount of ink. I'm going to check how dark this is. Bye. So I'm going to take that in here. You can also play with the brush and just get farther or closer, giving bigger or longer margins. Yeah, you don't have to always rely on the candle. Now before this dries, I'm going to mop a bit of it, and by doing so, just mopping the bottom part, I'm creating the sensation of a floor. So just try to leave that mark in here. I'm going to make a wrinkle with the cloth in here, and hopefully, yes, you see, get some print marks in some areas. Now I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to look at the picture a bit more. So I'm going to go darker in the areas of the picture where I see darker values, so I can go darker in here, some of the folds on the fabric of the leather. So I can go darker in there. Just being a bit more careful, but not too careful. I'm going to go for the ink and add a bit of a stronger shade at the bottom. That will create a sensation of gravity to the boots, that they are on top of something, otherwise they will look like they are floating. And I like this ink running on to the boot in there. And what I can do as well, if I find some of the lines getting weaker, because they will look weaker after all the layers we are adding on, you can then go back on some of them and make them stronger if you want to. You don't have to do the lines just at the beginning. Another wash in here that could go slightly darker. I'm going to let that dry a little bit. If you want to use the hair dryer, use it, yeah? That will speed things up a little bit, a lot. What else can we use? Let me find the skewer. Here it is. You can use the skewer on the lid, or you can also use the skewer just dipping it on the jar, whatever you prefer. Always is good to check, yeah, how much ink the skewer can hold. And what about making some extra marks in here? With the skewer, what you do marks that you cannot control as well as you do with a brush. And sometimes those lines and marks are more interesting than the ones you would use or achieve with a brush. But that's what I think, at least. You don't have to think or agree with me. Also, when I hold the skewer, I hold it like that, so it gives me more freedom. If you hold it like that, you are more likely to use the tip only, and the tip holds less ink than the side, you see? Which are particularly good to make small marks. I'm going to use now dirty water again. So either from here, or you have a bigger pot, use that. And I'm going to go darker wherever I think I need to go darker. Like here, for example. By going darker in here, I will define a bit more the laces of the boots. That one is, you have a bit more shadow here as well. So the amount of texture and random brushstrokes I'm adding is making them look a little bit older and worn and used. They are very old boots, so it would be nice to see that they are old boots on the drawing as well. Let's put new ink in there. I'm going to add some water in here. Whenever you run out of light ink, yeah, just mix it again, create a new one again, and before you use it on the paper, try to see how dark that looks, yeah? Might need a bit more water. That's better. Now the background is too tidy, so I'm going to just go with a big brush. Maybe a bit of water only. Try to use the experiments we used at the beginning. Just drop a bit of ink. And there. I could go even darker here if I wanted to. Okay, I'm going to let that dry a little bit more. Maybe before I do that, I'm going to just add a few. And what about using the fan brush again? Now straight from the... I'm dipping it in here in the lid, just ink. Just add some marks in here. If you find those marks too strong, just wait for them to spread a little bit more, and before they dry completely, you can just do like that, you see, and they become lighter. Okay. Now I'm going to wait for this to dry a bit more. A bit of extra light in there that I don't like, so I'm going to go with a dirty water in here. Now with just ink, I'm going to reduce some of the lines a bit more, now being a bit more careful than before, and start adding some detail. So I have these stitches in here. That would make the boot more interesting. Try to make this boot maybe slightly more important visually than this one, because this one is behind. Okay. I think my background looks a bit too clean still. I'm going to use the sponge now. Check Just a little bit too little. I'm going to put my more painting here. More ink, sorry. Again with the stencils. That's too strong. Get rid of that a little bit. If it's still too strong, which I think it is, just go with water on top of it before you let it dry. And you get rid of the strength of the ink. A bit messier. I want to make this area also a bit messier. Now just with water, I'm going to make this run. Now if the colors in your picture of the bottom area looks too close, or the colors, no, the values look too close to the values in here, what you can also do is just go with a bit of ink, just ink in here, straight ink from the tube or the can or the pot, and then just with water drag it up. Okay, let me think. I'm not sure about that, but I cannot do anything about it now. I should have left this and this the same, with nothing, so there will be a bit of silence in there. If that happens to you, one thing you could do is use gouache, yeah? I think that's it. I'm going to use a bit of candle on top of inked areas, which I don't think I haven't done in here. And then just a wash with just a bit of ink in here to let the ink come through. Let's see. I forgot about this cap. I need to go slightly darker because this is supposed to be the background there. So I'm going to go darker in there. And I do like that effect, so I'm going to try to do a bit of more of that. Try to keep everything you add on the background fluffy and soft edges, and then you will have the contrast between the soft edges of the background and the hard lines and hard edges on the foreground, on the boots. Maybe a bit more line working here. to do, because I do not like that, what I'm going to do is use sponge and just do a few marks on the top part so they have a bit of a connection, because otherwise if I just keep the texture in here but no texture in there, they will look too different. So I'm going to just put a bit of paint, or sorry, ink in my sponge, or on my sponge. Check how much ink I've got. Okay, and just add a few marks. I'm going to just now add a bit of water to make them slightly weaker. You can move the ink before it's completely dry. So that looks a bit better. That works. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that would be it. So the main thing is to play with the technique, to experiment, to allow mistakes to happen and learn how to solve the problems. I keep looking at things. You can carry on working forever, but I'm going to leave it at this, yeah? So don't think you have to only do this once. You can play with this same subject a few more times, and every time you do it, you will find different things that work, different things that don't, and then you get the ones that you like, and you keep moving or using them on the next picture if you want. And you don't have to use the same shoes. You can find your own boots and paint your own boots. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon again. Bye bye.